live. That's the plan anyway. It's just going like that. Oh, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Police Spies Out of Lives live broadcast of the UCPI evidence hearings tranche 1 phase 1 transcripts on Wednesday the 18th of November. I'm Alison, and I'm delighted to have with me my sister-in-arms Lisa and our very, very special guest Maxine Peake, who
Hello.
has kindly offered to read the evidence given today by Sandra, HN348. So a massive welcome, Maxine. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Maxine.
The transcript will start rolling in about 10 minutes. It will suddenly start moving in front of our eyes. And our task is to try and keep up with it and make it as accessible as possible to people who are trying to follow the public inquiry. And my phone is not off, so that's not good, is it? So Maxine, can you tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on this unfolding policing scandal and the inquiry?
Well, it's shock that it ever happened in the first place. You know, I knew a little bit about this previously, many years ago, you know, sort of over the recent years. But I mean, I'm elated that this is happening today and this is coming to light. I just hope that more and more people through, you know, events like this, being on YouTube, get to know about what the police were up to. You know, the misogynist behaviour and the attack on these innocent women, you know, and it goes to show that how protest and people standing up for truth and justice is feared so much. So, you know, it's very enlightening. It's been very enlightening for me. I thought I knew, and then obviously reading more of the information the last couple of days.
Do you think
what you do is wonderful. So.
Thank you. We were saying before, do you think there's a special branch file on you? We know there's one on us.
I wouldn't like to say. No. Won't there be one on all of us?
It's looking that way.
I shouldn't laugh, it's not funny.
Well, it's
anybody
on, Lisa.
Anyone outspoken is definitely in themselves at least a note in a file, if not a whole file. I'm sure, and you count in that category, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I do, don't I? I proudly do, yeah.
I mean, that idea that it's not funny, that's something we came up against on Monday when we, you know, did a reading of some of the evidence on Monday, because we, you know, we don't want to trivialise, you know, the hearings, and we don't want to trivialise the evidence. And the reason we're doing this is because, you know, we're not getting to see the real people live give this evidence. So we don't want to trivialise it. And yet there is something, certainly at moments, there certainly was on Monday, there are moments of farce, really, because either there's digital technical problems or there's stuff that comes out that we haven't seen yet and we're seeing for the first time. So I kind of alert you to that. I mean, there was one report on Monday that we saw that from 1970, I think, that described a woman, a 23-year-old woman who had fair hair and a well-developed bust and was of Jewish appearance. So, you know, we don't really know where to go with that, to be honest.
We'll stop with that. It's appalling, isn't it, that the you know, the police speak of, you know, we've just been seeing everyone with the Yorkshire Ripper and the problems there. You know, it's systemic, isn't it?
Well, that's what I think is going to be interesting about the years ahead and the evidence that comes out, because actually a well-developed bust and Jewish appearance, you know, is still, I don't know. It's not great, but it's still a bust, isn't it? It's not. We haven't got to bosoms yet, and we're not in the 90s of, you know, she's got nice tits, which I was described as having by my officers' friends, apparently. Yeah. So I think what's interesting for me is seeing how the culture is being established here very early that gets built upon later on. Don't you think, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, we've been told, or our lawyers have been told, that we don't have a direct interest in this stage of the proceedings, which is why our lawyers, you know, which is why we've not seen any of the material in advance, and neither have our lawyers. But as Alison was just saying, it's really, really crucial because it's setting, you know, it's all of this is setting the tone. This is when the units were first set up, and this is where all those attitudes and entrenched way of looking at protesters and looking at kind of any dissenters from the status quo, you know, it's how we were all viewed, and surely that has to be of relevance, you know.
Yeah.
And also I was going to say I'm feeling a bit nervous about reading the transcript because I've actually found it very difficult to follow it online. It's really hard to read, you know, to follow moving text. And so hopefully I won't stumble over it too much, but I guess that's the reason we're doing it, is because on the days that I haven't been able to read it, other people have been reading it aloud and I've been able to listen, which is much better, but it's nowhere near good enough. It's nowhere near as good as hearing the audio, which, given this 10-minute delay, I've no idea. I just don't understand the reasons why we can't hear the actual audio.
Or why the inquiry haven't managed to sort out actors to do this themselves. If they didn't want us to hear the voices, if they were concerned for privacy or security reasons for us to hear the voices, it's not really clear why, you know, why they haven't managed to, if we've managed to sort it out, you know, sort of do it yourself approach, then, you know, how haven't they sorted it out? Don't know. Anyway, we're going to see that the transcript is going to start rolling in about 3 minutes. So Maxine, if you want, I'm not sure whether you're visible on the screen or not, and I don't risk opening up any new applications to see if you are, but if it's a distraction for you, if you want to make yourself invisible.
Close my video down now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And is it worth explaining why there's we've been waiting until 10 past? You know, the fact that there is this 10-minute delay, it's supposedly for security, so they can delete anything. If the witness says anything that they shouldn't, the inquiry can delete it before we see it. Yeah,
that's what happened the other day, didn't it? Something was said, and then suddenly before our eyes, the transcript disappeared. So should we say just briefly about HN348, Sandra, who is going to be voiced by Maxine, was infiltrating the women's liberation movement in the early 1970s. So obviously a very radical, dangerous group of women, I think we're going to hear about not.
Yeah, it's shocking that is considered to have been a threat to national security, or rather, you know, it's a threat to the patriarchy. That's what it is.
Yeah, and 2 minutes and rolling. Lisa, are you ready? You feeling nervous?
Yes, I am actually. I am because I've never done anything like this before.
But I think that's the point, isn't it? It's about access. I mean, I used to be an English teacher, and some of the young people that I used to teach are adults now, and some of them would, well, you know, most people I know, in fact, never mind them, most people I know would find this extremely difficult to follow. And I think, you know, the idea that this is somehow accessible to the public at the moment is nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah.
A cynical person would suggest that's the idea.
Yeah, exactly. The least public inquiry in history.
Yeah. So, and I think we're going to start any minute. So I'm going to have to do 2 funny voices because I'm going to have to be Jacqueline Purser and then be the chair. And Lisa, you might, I never know whether there's 1 lawyer or 2 lawyers.
Will I just be any lawyer?
Yeah. Okay. And also, as always, multitasking, which is always risky, isn't it? Because something might start moving.
So do you
I have no idea how many listeners we have.
There's a few descriptions coming in, from physical descriptions from the people who are in the
yeah, should we share those privately?
Okay.
Here we go. Wow, the chairman. May I, Helen Steele was going to make our opening statement, but is not at present able to. Accordingly, we will put that back until an unknown date. We will resume at 2. Thank you very much, everyone. You may now move into your breakout rooms. Here we are. That was earlier. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the afternoon session of today's hearings. For those of you in the virtual hearing room, can I remind you to please switch off both your camera and microphone unless you're invited to speak by the chairman. I will now hand over to our chairman, Sir John Mitting, to continue proceedings. Chairman. Thank you. Good afternoon. As at the beginning of every evidential session, a recording made by me earlier is going to be played. With those listening to it for the first time, please listen carefully. I am conducting this inquiry under a statute, the Inquiries Act 2005, which gives me the power to make orders regulating the conduct of the inquiry, including its hearings. In the exercise of that power, I have made a number of orders which may affect what you may and may not do in the hearing rooms and after you leave them. Breach of any of the orders is a serious matter, and may have serious consequences for you. If I am satisfied that a person may have breached an order, I have the power to certify the matter to the High Court, which will investigate and deal with it as if it had been a contempt of that court. If satisfied that a breach has occurred and merits the imposition of a penalty, the High Court may impose a severe sanction on the person in breach, including a fine, imprisonment for up to 2 years, and sequestration of their assets. Evidence is going to be given live over screens in the hearing rooms. It is strictly prohibited to photograph or record what is shown on the screens, or to record what is said by a witness or anyone else in the hearing rooms. You may bring your mobile telephone into the hearing rooms, but you may not use it for any of those purposes. You may use it silently for any other purpose. In particular, you may transmit your account of what you have seen and heard in a hearing room to any other person, but only once at least 10 minutes have elapsed since the event which you are describing took place. This restriction has a purpose. In the course of the inquiry, I have made orders prohibiting the public disclosure of information, for example, about the identity of a person for a variety of reasons. These orders must be upheld. It is inevitable that, whether by accident or design, information which I have ordered should not be publicly disclosed will sometimes be disclosed in a hearing. If and when that happens, I will immediately suspend the hearing and make an order prohibiting further disclosure of the information outside the hearing rooms. The consequence will be that no further disclosure of that information may be made by mobile phone or other portable electronic device from within the hearing room or by any means outside it. I'm sorry if you find this message alarming. It is not intended to be. Its purpose is simply to ensure that everyone knows the rules which must apply if I am to hear the evidence which I need to enable me to get to the truth about undercover policing. You, as members of the public, are entitled to hear the same public evidence as I will hear and to reach your own conclusions about it. The inquiry team will do their best to ensure that you can. Sorry. If you have any doubt about the terms of this message or what you may or may not do, you should not hesitate to ask one of them, and with my help, if necessary, they will provide you with the answer. May witness HN348 please be sworn or affirmed at her wish. Miss Purser. Good afternoon, HN348. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. I understand that you would like to swear on the Bible.
That's correct.
Witness is sworn.
It's interesting they don't do that publicly.
What do you mean?
We can't hear the swearing in.
No, I can't hear any of it. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room with you?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you, sir. HN348, you made a statement for the inquiry, which is dated 14th of October 2019. Have you had a chance to read and check that statement?
Yes, I have.
And is it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, it is.
As far as your cover name was concerned, you recall using the name Sandra. That's right, isn't it?
That's right.
And by a process of elimination, having looked now at a number of the reports, given that there were no other Sandras that you recall attending the groups, you think it's possible that you used the name Sandra Davis when you attended the meetings?
That's possible, but I can't remember it.
Well, we'll look a little bit later at the reporting, at the reports.
Okay.
On the topic of names on the reports, at the bottom of the reports, and we'll be looking at some today, we often see the signatures of a chief inspector and a chief superintendent. And although we see your real name appearing as a cipher in the reports, as we look at them today, your real name is typed underneath with your rank of WDC next to it, isn't it?
Yes.
It might be obvious, but can you confirm why your name appears at the bottom of these reports?
Is it because I've written them?
That, on the face of it, seems to make sense. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Did you actually type them yourself?
No, I didn't.
How did you supply the information?
In the form of a written report.
And where did you write your reports?
At our cover house.
Is that one of the two safe houses?
Yes.
How often did you write your reports?
Each event that I attended was then followed by a report.
Sometimes we see, and if you'd like to see an example on the screen, then we can pull one up. But sometimes we see a difference between the date of the report and the event of something, like in the event of 3 or 4 days. Would you be writing the notes on the date of the report or at some point in between the event and the date on the report?
I might well have written some notes on the day, then followed up with a full report.
And the full reports were always written in the safe houses. Where would you keep your notes?
I would have kept them on my person.
What information did you understand you should include in your reports?
The date and time and location of the meeting. Who was present, and the main reason and the outcome of the meeting. In essence, yeah.
Was there anything you understood that you should not include in your reports?
No.
So, in terms of any training or experience you'd had of writing the sorts of reports that you were writing when you were in the Special Demonstration Squad or the SDS, had you had any previous experience of writing those kind of reports?
No, no, not as such.
Were you given any specific guidance about what it was that special branch who received your reports were interested in?
Yes. The information of the squad was based on the lack of evidence in the past relating to demonstrations where the police were not prepared for the numbers and the outcome of the demonstrations, particularly what happened in Grosvenor Square back in the 60s. And I think it's my understanding that that's why the squad was formed, so that the police could be prepared for incidents like this and building up intelligence so they could prepare for what might occur.
Did that include building up personal information about people that you interacted with?
Yes, to a degree. Building up a picture of the people that were involved in these various groups for an understanding of, you know, what the motives were, really.
Can we have a look at, on the screen, report UCPI 1000, lots of zeros, 26387, please. If you wait there, it will come up on the screen 348.
Okay.
Is this an example of a report where you are passing on information solely about an individual that you've come into contact with? If we just scroll down, we can see underneath where your cipher is there. And your rank appears at the bottom right. Do you see that? 348?
Yeah.
Thank you. If we just look a bit further up at the content.
Yeah.
Do you see that it says the following information has been received from the reliable source? You're the reliable source here, aren't you?
That's correct, yeah.
Privacy. And on the face of it, a name appears underneath that of the Women's Liberation Front and the North London Alliance in Defence of Women's Rights left this country on 14/8/71 en route for a holiday in Albania. She apparently travelled by sea/coach, although her route was unknown. On her return, she plans to, once the other present shortly, I'm not following this, and you submit that with a copy of the photograph of the person during an Indian Workers Association demonstration, and you confirm that it's a good likeness of her. Why did you understand it necessary to pass that sort of personal information about that character to the special branch?
I think it's to do with the link with the bookshop in North London and the links with other extreme groups associated with that bookshop and other groups, as far as I can remember. I think that's why that might have been relevant.
Are you suggesting that the groups that you've listed in this report are extreme in their nature? Or are you suggesting that other groups that attend the bookshop might have been extreme?
I think because of the way that the members of this women's liberation from were expressing themselves, the links, more information was required to see the relevance of them.
So that's a report about an individual, a particular individual, and there are other examples of that sort of reporting.
Yeah.
But having looked at your report, would you agree that by far the majority of the reporting that you provided was in relation to your attending at regular meetings in people's homes? Actually.
Yes, that and at public meetings.
Yes, some public meetings, but we'll look in a bit more detail about the sort of regular weekly meetings, I think, that were set up in a couple of homes. And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail.
Right.
But when you were attending meetings in people's homes, just concentrating on what you were reporting back, we can take this example down from the screen now, please. Thank you. Concentrating on what you understood you needed to report back, were you ever given guidance about the balance of the private information that should appear in your reports and what was actually needed by Special Branch for effective policing?
I think there's so much of an overlap between the personal behaviour and the behaviour that they were involved in. It's difficult to separate one from the other, really.
But were you given guidance when you began attending at people's home addresses for meetings within their kitchen or somewhere else in their home? Were you given guidance by anybody as to how you should approach what you should and shouldn't report about and what you saw and heard in their homes?
What I do remember being told was that I was there as an observer, not as a participant, and that I was told about agent provocateur, that I should avoid that sort of involvement. I was just recording what was said and planned at these meetings.
Beyond that, on the face of what you're saying, you received no guidance about whether, if you picked up some private or personal information about what was going on in the home, whether you should include that in your reports.
And not as such, because if I'm writing a report, my senior officer would be there with me reading it. And probably would have told me at the time, well, that's not necessary, that's not what we want. So I'm writing the report and giving it to him. And at that point, you know, he would accept it and say, well, you know, continue doing what you're doing.
And when that report had been written, handwritten by you and given to your superior,
yeah,
did you then see what happened next? How did it come to you as a typed report with editing or not from your superior?
I don't know where it went. It was handed to my superior officer who then dealt with it. I don't know who typed it or what happened to it.
And do you recall any occasions when what you had handwritten in a report was pointed out to be irrelevant by one of your superiors?
I can't recall. I can't remember.
Do you recall an occasion when any of your superiors said, don't include this amount of detail, or please don't feed back this sort of information?
No.
Where did you understand your intelligence was ultimately sent on to?
I assumed it was sent to senior police officers and possibly the security services.
Did you know at the time that it was being sent to the security service?
No, I don't think I really thought about it at the time, no.
Is that something that you've picked up from reading the material during this inquiry?
Yeah.
Could we just have a look at Madhya Pradesh, UCPI 1 lots of zeros 14736 on the screen? Please. If we just scroll down to the bottom and confirm that this is your identity. Thank you. There's 348 and the cipher and your rank appearing there. If we just scroll back up again, can we see there, this is a report dated the 2nd of February 1973. It's actually quite close, I think, towards the end of your deployment, 348. But this is a letter, or it refers to a letter from Box 500. Did you know that at the time to be the shorthand for the security services?
No, I don't think I did. I might have done, I can't remember.
This is a Box 500 letter. Of 15th of the 1st, 73, that's being referred to. Refers to recent correspondence concerning the move of blank and blank. Asks whether the new address. So on the face of it, this is a question that's being raised by the security service that they want to find out about a change of address and a telephone. Do you see that, 348?
Yeah.
And then at paragraph 2 of the report, the following information has now been received from a reliable source. And then at paragraph 3, do we see that, can we scroll down just a little bit further, please? That you were able to report back, although blank are now Livingstone at blank, they are still using their former address blank for, and then that's the initials of the London Alliance Group and Revolutionary Women's Union purposes. Their new address is supposed to be a secret, and they have said that they have no intention of holding political meetings there until they are well established. There's no telephone at blank, and the number of blank remains printed on all correspondence. So on the face of it, intelligence that you have gathered has been specifically used to answer the questions there that the security service raised. Do you recall being tasked specifically at the time to answer questions that had been raised by the security service?
No, I don't recall that at all.
And is that an example of a report typed up afterwards based on information from you, which appears to be in quotations in the middle?
That's how it seems.
I'll ask this question in case you're able to help us with it. Do you know what the notation copy to dummy file means? Does that help? Does that mean anything to you at all?
No, I don't know what that means.
Can I move on now? And can we take this report on the screen, please? To your selection and training, please. Had you been security vetted before you joined the police force?
Yes.
And you joined the police service and had several years' experience, some in another force and some in the Metropolitan Police Service, before joining Special Branch in January 1971. Is that right?
That's correct.
From that joining in January 71, you were then recruited very quickly to the SDS. and we'll see your early reports are as soon as the 17th of February 1971. Does that time frame sound right to you?
Yeah, that seems right, yeah.
Had you done any undercover policing or work using a cover identity before joining the Special Demonstration Squad?
No.
How were you selected to join Special Branch?
I was invited to apply.
Was there a procedure that you had to undergo?
Yes. I had to sit a written examination and I had several interviews.
And as far as training, once you'd been offered the role in Special Branch, was there any training before or once you'd secured your place?
No.
Was it as short as 3 or 4 weeks between joining Special Branch and ultimately being recruited to join the Special Demonstration Squad?
I think it was more than weeks, but it was definitely perhaps months. I can't remember. It was quite a short period of time, but it might have been just a few months, I think.
What had you hoped to do in Special Branch when you applied to join them?
At the time, I was considering the police force as my long-term career, and I saw it as a way of expanding experience, really, because I was due to take my sergeant's exam, and I thought the experience in the branch would, you know, extend my knowledge and give me better grounding for further development.
And presumably, with that in mind, when you were spoken to, as we understand, by Peter Imbert, who later became the Commissioner for the Metropolitan Police Service, and he explained that there was this opportunity to work at the Special Demonstration Squad, did that fit with your aspirations?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I don't really think I quite understood what I was getting into at the time, but I thought it was, again, part of my career development, because at the time, the way that the police service operated was, as one got promoted, you know, once you'd taken exams, etc., then you would be promoted and transferred perhaps to another department. They move police officers around a lot more. They don't leave them in one place these days. Yeah, so that was kind of part and parcel of it, I think. Well, that was my thinking at the time.
How did it happen that he came to speak to you?
I've got no idea. Perhaps they were just looking for a woman, and, you know, women in those days, there weren't many of us. Perhaps there was nobody else.
Had you heard about the Special Demonstration Squad before?
No, I didn't know about it.
Or Special Duties Section at one stage, the SDS, in any event? You hadn't heard about it? Did Peter Imbert explain that it was a secret unit?
He said it was undercover to collate and disseminate information about antisocial behaviour, I think. That was the essence of it, yeah.
And did you understand, I think you helped with this a little bit earlier, that it had been set up because the police had felt that they hadn't been prepared enough for the demonstrations in the past?
That's right. Well, they were really inadequately prepared for the Grosvenor Square, you know, for an example, that particular demonstration.
What did he explain your role would be? There seems to be a stutter in the proceedings.
They've had enough. Too much typing.
Must be hard on the fingers.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, what did he explain your role would be as an undercover officer?
Oh, where am I? I don't think he explained the role as such. As I said, you know, he talked about agent provocateur and not getting too departmentally involved, to be more of a bystander and observer and to report back, you know, and with any intelligence relating to public order.
And using the term agent provocateur, what did you understand that to mean?
Well, very involved, I suppose, or provocative and to promote, you know, the wrong sort of behaviour then.
And what was the wrong sort of behaviour?
Well, violent behaviour, anything that was aimed at undermining our democracy. Yeah, I think not getting too involved, I think, is what he meant.
Did he at that stage? And we'll look at the annual report, which deals with the fact that your entry to the unit doubled the number of female officers in the unit and what that meant for the unit. But did he explain at the time, when he was talking to you, that he envisaged that you would be deployed into the women's liberation movement?
No, he didn't specify any of that at the meeting I had with him. So
let's just look at the record of your entry to the unit and what it meant for them. If we pull up MPS 0728971, please, and we'll go to page 5. MPS 0728971/5. Thank you. Paragraph 9, right there for us in the middle of the screen, appears to refer to your entry into the unit because it says, the arrival of a second woman officer has added considerably to the squad's flexibility and has proved invaluable in the comparatively recent field of women's liberation. Did you understand that there was already a lady officer in the unit by the name of Jill Mosdell when you joined?
I didn't know at the time, but I did get to know Jill once I started working there, yes.
You can take that down now, thank you. How long did you understand your deployment would last for?
I didn't know.
Was any expression mentioned to you that it should not last longer than a year?
No, that wasn't laid down to me at all.
Did anyone discuss with you the impact that it might have on your home life?
No.
Did anyone make a home visit to meet you? Or I think ultimately you were married during the course of your deployment to meet you or your husband in due course?
You mean any senior officer?
Yes.
No.
The other female detective constable was Jill Mosdell, wasn't it, in the unit with you at the time?
That's right, yes.
She was deployed, I think, into a different field.
That's right, yes.
I think we'll hear that. I think we'll hear that her area was the Stop the 70 tour to the anti-apartheid movement. And she was in the movement from 1970 to 1973. So very much overlapping with your time frame, 1971 to 1973.
That's right, yes.
Did she become a good friend?
She did.
And did she offer her view or any knowledge that she'd picked up about how long deployment should last for?
I don't think we ever discussed that. No.
The cover identity or legend that you used was that you portrayed yourself as a student. at the Goldsmiths College, is that right?
That's right.
And you had a cover address in a house share in Paddington, and you chose to wear no makeup and took off your wedding and engagement rings. What training had you to prompt you to take those sorts of steps and to have that sort of backstory in place?
I didn't have any formal training. I might have been advised to remove my rings, and my style of dress was just very simple. No particular style. I think I describe it as worn and washed in my statement.
Yes. When you say you were advised, did that take the form of a meeting in the police officers, or in the police officers' information that was shared with you? Or was there something in writing that helped you understand that you would have this identity and address?
As far as I recall, it was not in writing. It would have been in conversation with the senior officers at the time.
Did you visit the address in Paddington?
Yes.
How frequently do you think?
I think I'd call in there perhaps once a week. I can't remember exactly. Dropped in there periodically.
And was this a bedroom in a big house?
That's right, yeah, just one room.
Can you remember how many other people there were in the house?
No, it was a big house. I never got to know any of the other people in the house. There was a lot of to-ing and fro-ing. It was sort of... Yeah, no, I never got to know anybody there. In fact, I think that whenever I went there was never anybody there, or that I ran into at least.
To the extent that you ever had to introduce yourself to anybody, was it that you were prepared to give a name to those people, the same name that you were giving to the group that you were infiltrating?
I would have thought so, if that had been necessary, but I don't think I ever did.
We see that you first, and again, we'll come on to it looking at the reports in due course to the extent that we need to, but do you recall that you first attended a public meeting in a public house where the Women's Liberation Front were having a meeting, and then moved into, by invitation, smaller meetings at people's homes?
Yes. No, I can't remember exactly the sequence of that, but the first meeting that I would have attended would have been a big public meeting under the umbrella of the Women's Liberation Movement. And within that meeting, there were all sorts of different groups, each with varying philosophies. And it would have been probably during that public meeting that I would have been approached by this group and invited then to one of their meetings.
And you recall it that way round, do you? That you were approached by them rather than you approaching?
Yes. Yeah.
How many people were at these meetings, these big meetings?
Well, at some of the big meetings, there were hundreds of women there from all different walks of life and representing different groups, different bodies. There were usually a public platform at the big public meetings, and then the various groups, would be invited to comment or ask questions, and they would ask it in a way that would putting forward the philosophies, really. I always thought they were using the movement, the wider movement, as a way of expressing their own particular views.
And how did it happen that these groups within that had all attended such a large public meeting would come to approach a lone woman attending like you?
Well, I think they had different stands with different leaflets. They were doing a lot of leafleting, and they would pull out the leaflets, and that probably would have triggered a conversation to the effect that, you know, I was interested in, you know, women's issues. Well, we were likely to come to this meeting.
I think we're having another freeze. Hopefully we won't have to read too fast.
It came a bit quick last time, didn't it?
I mean, it just illustrates that it's really easy to miss things when that happens.
Yeah.
Oh, who told you that that was the way to infiltrate a group?
Nobody told me. I would just attend a meeting, report back, tell my superior officer at the time, I've been given this leaflet and I've been invited to this meeting. What do you think? And, you know, at their direction or on their advice, I would go to a meeting or not.
Was that pattern repeated after every meeting so that you would have prior authority effectively to go?
Yeah. Before I would go to any of these meetings, I would discuss it with my senior officer at the time, yeah.
Now, HN348
yes,
was somebody who was deployed into a similar field. If we have a look at the report of his that chronologically may have triggered the beginning of your deployment, it might help. If we look at UCPI, 1, lots of zeros, 10567, please. If that will, it'll come up on the screen for you.
Oh, okay, right.
Don't worry. I know that you've had a bundle of a hard copy, but we'll look at the screen.
Okay.
This is a report dated the 22nd of January. And we see at paragraph 3 that, well, we'll start at the top. This is a meeting that has been, temporarily paused. Presumably they're going to try and deal with a technical issue.
It could be technical, or it could be that there's someone said something that is being redacted.
Yes.
What do you think?
It could be. I mean, there's no way of us knowing from this position, is there? We don't know if this is happening in, if there's a pause in the inquiry, or if it's just for us.
Ah, yes.
We were going to give some date and numbers, weren't we, if this happened? We're going to update people, though most people listening, but not necessarily, probably know this, but at the last count, we had more than 30 women who were deceived into relationships with undercover officers like us. And we know of 21 officers who've deceived women into those relationships. So it'll be interesting to see whether anything else comes out today and tomorrow about that. Yeah,
and it's crazy that none of those 30 women are considered to have an interest in the fact that the women's liberation movement was infiltrated in the 70s.
I know. That's
mad, sort of directly relevant.
Yeah.
It is quite hard to read, isn't it, with the changing speeds of the you can't really go back and look at a sentence, the beginning of a sentence.
Yeah, because it's that you can't second guess like you would in a script. If you're improvising, you'd go well. But I've just read about saying she's quite hesitant, lots of ums and ahs that have been sort of edited out, and you can sort of get, I wondered why. I thought she must have a slow pace.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, hang on. Who's what? Okay, so the Women's Liberation Front hope to extend its activities in the same sphere. 2 new branches have been formed, one in South London and one in North London, which is in the Palmer's Green area and will be run by blank and blank. This location has been carefully chosen so as to be close to a factory of the metal box company of the North Circular Road, which employed a large number of women. Blank said she would end her present deployment in order to take employment with the metal box company. HN348, can we just scroll down? We don't need to, thank you very much. There we are. Was somebody who was familiar with the politics in that area, in this particular area? Is that right?
Yeah, yes, he was.
And did he give you a presentation about the relevant politics that were involved in the Women's Liberation Front?
Yes, he did.
What was that presentation about?
It was mainly to do with the Maoist movement.
And what did he explain there of the Maoist movement and perhaps the thinking behind the name or the principles enunciated by Mr. Manchunada? What did you understand those to be about?
Well, I can't remember one word of that presentation, but it was really a group that was opposed to our form of democracy, but I can't remember the details of any of the Maoist policies.
Were you familiar with the identity of Chairman Mao?
Yes.
And did he have some quite extreme views to express about how you go about changing democracy or the government if you disagree with it?
I think so, yes. I think that was the reasoning, you know, these groups being looked at more closely.
Did you have, apart from that presentation, were you ever given any other advice about how to conduct yourself in these meetings or about the background political situation?
Well, apart from keeping a low profile, no, not really.
Did you ever ask for access to any of the special branch files on anyone during your deployment for research or for any other reason?
No.
Were you ever given guidance on the definition of the term subversion?
No.
What about the definition of the term extremism?
Well, I think we all understood that these groups were working against our form of democracy.
How did you understand that they were carrying out that work against what in your mind was extremism?
Well, I think that's all we were looking at. That was the purpose of our job, to see whether or not they were going to take direct action or whether it was just words.
And do I understand from that distinction in your mind that direct action was a problem, but just words weren't?
Well, in our society, you know, we were entitled to our opinions. You know, we can say what we like, basically. Well, no, we can't say exactly what we like, of course, but we've got Speaker's Corner where people do stand up, as long as they just don't go too far, they can express their views.
You were, again, just looking at the guidance and the sort of understanding of the remit that you had before you started your deployment. You were spoken to about the extent to which you could participate in crime. And I think this is where you referenced the phrase agent provocateur. Could we just bring up your statement to see a particular expression that you use at paragraph 18? The relevance for the screen, MPS, and we'll bring it up for you, 348. MPS 0741698. We need page 8, please. MPS 0741698/8. This is a question you were asked in your witness statement about a Home Office circular entitled Informants Who Take Part in Crime. And at this question of your statement, you were asked whether you'd seen it, and you explain that you don't recall being shown the circular, but you would say that you were made aware of the principles. That's where you explain that Peter Imbert certainly referred to the term agent provocateur, and it was explained to you as meaning not to be involved in any illegal activities. And you go on to say, being arrested, going to court, and issues of legal privilege were never discussed explicitly. I think the assumption was that we were protected. And you go on to say, but personally, I would never have been involved in any criminal activities. And what did you mean by the expression, I think the assumption was that we were protected?
I'm not sure what that means. As an individual, I would not get involved in any criminal activities. That's the sort of person I am. As a police officer, that is part of what you are. You are there to uphold the law, not to break it and get involved in criminal activities, regardless of what role you're playing. And I think that was understood without question, that even as an undercover officer, you're still a police officer, you're still an individual, and that's not what you do.
The document that was being referred to was titled Informants Who Take Part in Crime, and I think was designed to cover a situation where, if you are, for the sake of gathering further information or important intelligence, in a situation where you might have to commit a criminal offence, what might happen then? Does that help with what you were expressing there in terms of your thinking? That you would be protected if you had to get involved in something that crossed the line into criminality?
No. As an individual, I would not cross the line. I think when you talk about informants, generally, in the police service, they do use informants that are involved in criminality for information. But not police officers get involved in criminality.
So that's your understanding, as it was during your deployment?
Yeah.
Were you aware of the STS using some informants, not other people using undercover police officers?
I don't know. It might have been possible, but not in my experience.
What did you understand the rules were about forming close relationships with activists or being involved in their private lives?
As I understood it, we were not briefed to get involved closely with these people. That they were to be kept at a distance. We were there as observers to listen and learn and report back on any activities that, as I've already said, public order and aimed at undermining our democracy.
Do I take it from that answer that your understanding was that you shouldn't form such relationships?
Absolutely.
Did you ever form a relationship with one of the people that you became involved with? Or
no.
In your statement, and we don't need to bring it up, but if you remember this particular phrase, you said that you knew sexual relationships were not allowed, although it was never discussed explicitly. How did you know they weren't allowed if it was never discussed explicitly?
I think it was, well, it didn't need to be discussed specifically. It was something that didn't happen.
by that, do I understand your answer to the next question will be a no? Were you ever aware of any of your colleagues having intimate or sexual relationships with anyone in their target group?
No. Within the group that I worked with at the time, as far as I am aware, and I can really say no, that none of them were involved with the groups in that way.
In your statement at paragraph 17, you have said that once you were in the field, we supported each other as UCOs when we had our meetings. Were these meetings in the safe houses?
That's right, yeah.
How often did you have these meetings?
Oh, quite a few times a week. Sometimes, every day, weekday. I can't remember exactly.
Were all the deployed officers there at the same time?
Most of them were, most of the time, yeah. Well, within the group that I was working with at the time.
Within the group of the unit, do you mean?
Yeah.
Or within the group of your field of expertise?
No, within all of the group, although they were working with different groups.
Right. So all the deployed undercover officers from the SDS would all meet at the same time?
Yes, together with senior officers.
And about how many were there roughly?
At the same time that I was there, I think there were about 12 of us, excluding the senior officers.
And how long would these meetings last?
Oh, it varied really. A good part of the day. They're usually during the daytime, and perhaps from 10 to 4, something like that.
The figure of 12 included senior officers. About how many senior officers would be there?
There were, I think it was 2 superintendents, the chief inspector and 2 sergeants, but I'm not absolutely sure.
Were any administrative staff there to type anything up?
No.
And when you were at these meetings and you offered to support each other, help us to understand what you mean by that. What sort of things would you discuss in a way that offered support to each other?
I think we didn't discuss the detail of what we were involved in, even with each other. We just, I think, generally talked about perhaps some of the outrageous things that we heard. But we didn't go into too much detail of what we were doing. The detail of our meetings was just shared with my senior officer and my written report.
What sort of outrageous things are you thinking of? What sort of outrageous things are you thinking of? What would you say? Why would you say that?
Well, some of them were quite small groups. And the thoughts of how they would overthrow, our government.
And these would be reported back by your colleagues as having been heard about the group that they were infiltrating.
I can't remember the detail of it, to be honest.
And that's the sort of example. That's the sort of example that you were able to help us with.
Yeah.
Does it follow from that there was no rule against sharing what you had picked up from other people's groups?
I don't know if you can say a rule. It's just that we didn't share. That was only shared in our written reports and with one-to-one with our senior officer.
the one-to-one with a senior officer, may I just explore a bit further which of the senior officers, you said 2 detective sergeants and superintendent and a chief inspector would be there at your meetings.
Yeah.
And this could be every weekday on some occasions, on some weeks.
Yeah.
So who was the person that you would have your one-on-one with?
You want me to name his name?
Well, no, tell us the rank actually, please.
Okay, well, I think at the time he was either superintendent or chief intendant, but I can't remember because I think he was promoted.
All right, do you have a cipher key there next to you? 34.
Yes, do you want me to see if I can find it?
Yes, if you can, please.
Sorry about this.
It's all right. I think I can help with a chief inspector name, which I know is a name that I can reveal that does not have a cipher.
Yeah.
Chief Inspector Phil Saunders.
That's right.
Was it him or was it one of the others?
It was Saunders, yeah.
There was also HN348, I think, at the same sort of rank.
294. Yeah, he was one of the, so what rank was he at the time? Yeah. 294 was the other senior officer, but in the main, together with the previous, with Phil Saunders, yeah.
And there was also HN332 in your management structure.
332. HN 332. No, I do remember his name, but I don't think if he did, he didn't come on a regular basis to our safe house. Yeah.
So Phil Saunders did, 294 did.
Yeah.
And was an officer by the surname Cunningham at any of those meetings? And would you have a one-on-one with either your senior officer Phil Saunders?
Yeah. Might
that alternate to HN294 some days, or was it always the same senior officer that you reported to?
It was mainly with Phil Saunders.
And did he have a one-to-one with each of the officers in your unit at those meetings?
Yeah, that's right.
And how long were you in? You've referenced a sort of a 6-hour period that these meetings might last for.
Oh,
how long? How long did you end up speaking to your senior officer for?
Oh, it could have been half an hour, 20 minutes.
And then for the rest of the time, what would you and your colleagues do?
Oh, sometimes I mentioned the occasion that, HN45 gave his presentation about the Maoists, and there might be some other presentations about other political groups to educate us a little bit more about their philosophies. But I can't remember the details. There was usually something like that during the course of the day, then writing our reports up.
And if somebody had been having a difficulty in their deployment or had found themselves in a compromising situation with an activist, would that have been the sort of environment and the occasion to share it with you or with your other colleagues?
Yes, I think if somebody really was having a difficult time, the first instance, they probably would have shared it with Phil Saunders.
Were you supervised on a day-to-day basis when you went out to your meetings?
No.
And I think, in fact, at paragraph 17 of your statement, you said you had no backup and no support. It was just you attending meetings on your own.
That's right, yes.
And I think you went on to explain that sometimes when the meetings finished late and you were travelling home on public transport, that it was your husband that used to pick you up.
That's right, yes.
And that was an arrangement that you had to make. Nothing was arranged through your police unit.
No.
Did you ever attend any of the SDS reunion events that ever happened over the years?
No.
And when did you first come to learn that some undercover officers working within the SDS had relationships, intimate relationships with the people that they'd been targeting?
Well, it wasn't until I received a telephone call, the Met Police back, it's over 3 years ago now. Is it 3 years ago?
So in the recent years?
Yes. They contacted me and I didn't know anything about it. And I did find it quite shocking at the time. And then they suggested that I look at, I think there was a World in Action programme about it all, some other investigative documentary, and there had been a book written as well by one of the officers. And they suggested that I read that. But I didn't know, truth from lies at that time, what was fiction of any of it. So, yeah, this is when this inquiry's about seeing where the truth and where the lies begin and end. So no, I knew nothing about it at all.
And looking now at your deployment, moving on from training and guidance that you received, you were deployed ultimately into the women's liberation movement. And from your earlier answers, does it sound like coincidence or your choice ultimately that you collected flyers for the Women's Liberation Front?
I think I collected quite a lot of literature, not just from but because there was these meetings, there was a lot of literature flying around. So yeah, I picked up all sorts, and all of that would have been submitted with my report.
Can we look at your statement again? The reference is MPS 0741698, and it will come up on the screen. At page 18, please. MPS 041698/18. I'm going to look at page 18, please. Paragraph 42. Just look at the latter part of that. The latter part of that paragraph. Where, and this is a reference to the fact that, to that part of the annual report that we've looked at about the fact that your addition to the unit had proved valuable in the comparatively recent field of women's liberation. And you say, again, I was not aware that I was specifically recruited for this purpose, but it is possible.
Yeah.
Women's liberation was viewed as a worrying trend at the time. Was that how you put it?
Yeah.
By whom?
By whom? Yeah, that's right. By all sorts of people.
And who did you mean when you wrote that?
I think it wasn't just the whole. I think it was factions within the movement that were worrying at the time, not the whole of the women's liberation movement.
You were a woman in the Metropolitan Police Force in 1971. And I think you've already alluded to the fact that there weren't many of you.
Yes.
On the same document, can we go to page 6, please? MPS 041698/6, paragraph 11. Did you have, as a woman in the Metropolitan Police Service, the same police powers as your male colleagues?
Yes, I did.
But were you paid the same?
No, we were not.
How much were you paid?
We were paid 90% of the men's salary.
Page 47, please, of the same document. MPS 0741698/47, paragraph 130. You are there recounting an incident which I think this is their pause again. Tech fail. Oops, you are there recounting an incident which helps give the flavour of that attitude I think you're alluding to when you talk about the views that were held by certain people. This was an incident that you were, when you were a uniformed police officer and you were here explaining how you were not expected to show weakness. This was a demonstration. We can tell from the timings of other information that this was a demonstration in the London area. Can you recall this from your statement 348?
Yes, yeah.
And you had been sitting on a police bus operating the radio and other officers were walking outside. And you said that there must have been some sort of incident for them to have left the bus. We got trapped in a narrow street and detached from the rest of the other police vehicles. And the crowds were throwing rocks from skips at the side of the road. And they started rocking the bus and trying to set fire to it. I had to pull injured officers off the street and back onto the bus. Eventually, we got some support and managed and got away from there. When I got back to the station, I was covered in blood. I was really quite frightened, but there was no counselling. The men used to say, you joined a man's job, so get on with it. Is that a flavour of your experience in the police force as a woman at the time?
At the time, I think, yeah, there were, I mean, not all policemen, but that was a general feeling, I think, amongst many officers.
That incident was a demonstration in the London area. Does that help us tie in a broad time frame for the time period, certainly before 1971, when you were deployed into Special Branch and the SDS, and certainly after the late 60s, which we're concerned with? Does that tie the time frame down?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, now we can take that document down. The main issues that were being campaigned for by the women's liberation movement at the time, according to your statement, were equal pay, free contraception to enable women to choose whether to have children or not, and free nursery provision to enable women to go to work. And those were issues that you had genuine interest in. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Was campaigning on those issues considered subversive or unlawful at all?
No. I don't think so. So no.
So why did you understand that you'd been deployed to infiltrate this movement?
Well, because of the links with other more extreme groups where women were involved.
Were you given the names of the groups that were more extreme that you had to look out for?
I think at the time there was a lot of unrest in many areas, and I think the Angry Brigade were mentioned, and there were all sorts of links to Irish extremists because the Irish situation was very volatile at that. Well, I think we were all mindful of that as well.
Did you, in fact, see any subversive or disruptive or violent extremist behaviour in the group that you infiltrated?
No, I didn't.
If I just deal with two aspects of your statement on this point, and then it may be a convenient moment for a break. Can we have a look at, begin the same document again, your statement, MPS, uh, 0741698, please. Page 9, please. MPS 0741698/9, paragraph 19, third line down. The activists were not breaking any laws by meeting and demonstrating unless they took a further step and broke the law. The activities that the groups I infiltrated were involved in were hosting meetings, leafleting and demonstrations. They were all within the bounds of the law. The political ideology that they were promoting did not spill over into what they were doing. They were just very vocal. Of course, the MPS were concerned about whether it would spill over. The Irish situation was very bad at the time, and there were links between Ireland and some of the groups that we were infiltrating. In the 2 years that you infiltrated the groups that you were reporting on, did you ever see it spill over?
No, not that I can recall. I have no knowledge of it in any ways.
Page 38 of the same document, please. MPS 0741698/38, paragraph 93. I did not witness or participate in any public disorder whilst serving within the SDS. I do not even recall going on any marches or demonstrations. I did not witness, nor was I involved in any violence. And further down, paragraph 94. Third line down. The WLF, the Women's Liberation Front, was involved in influencing people's thinking, but I do not know if this could be considered somebody version. The WLF was more talk than action. I was tasked to observe them because Special Branch did not know much about them and wanted to find out what was really happening. Is that the situation of your entire 2-year deployment? Were you just finding out what was going on?
Yeah, that's probably right. Yes. Yeah.
If we pause there, sir, if it's a convenient moment for a break, and we'll come back and look at a few example reports after the break.
Indeed it is. Can we resume at 25:02? That will give you just over 15 minutes break. Is that enough? Sorry, HN348?
Yes.
We're having just over a 15-minute break. I wondered whether that was enough for you. You can have longer if you prefer.
No, that's fine. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Then 25:02. Miss Purser. Thank you, everyone. We will now take a short break until 25:02. Please return to your breakout rooms. And in the meantime, thank you. And we will return at, I can't do the maths, 22. Yes?
Great.
Thank you, Maxine. How are you?
I'm all right.
You're exhausted.
No, it's fascinating.
It is really fascinating, isn't it?
Absolutely fascinating.
My eyes are going dizzy. I'm going to have to look away from the screen for a minute.
Well, I'm going to put myself on mute, and I suggest we just go on mute and then come back in 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Speak to you in a minute. Bye.
All right. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lisa.
Oh, are we back?
Yes. We've had the break. Oh, okay.
Yes,
There we go. Yes.
I suddenly thought they were expecting us to read again.
My brain is mashed.
Yeah, my eyes have gone a bit funny.
I'm very impressed with the pair of you as non-professionals. You're very
okay. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Welcome back, everyone. I will now hand over to the chairman to continue proceedings. Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you, sir. 348. We had been looking at part of your statement which explains that it was the links, and particularly the Irish connections, that were of concern to Special Branch, and that were linking from the groups that you were meeting with. So can we just have a look now at some example reports to help demonstrate the sort of links and attitudes that Special Branch were particularly concerned about? Can we bring up, please, UCPI 1, lots of zeros. Oops, and it's gone. 26692. Did I say that wrongly? Oh, hang on, I've missed a bit. Can we just look at some examples? So the sort of links and attitudes Special Branch were particularly concerned about. Yes, I think it should just be 2 pages, and I'm interested in the first page. So that's 26992 is the number. This is a report dated 15th of March about an event on the 11th of March. So this is an example of you having attended something and then writing it up at a meeting a few days later. Do we see that this is a report of a meeting on the 11th of March between 7:30 and 9:30? It was a meeting held by the Women's Liberation Front, and it was entitled A Study Group. It was at somebody's home and there were 7 people present. Can we scroll down? Further down that page, please. There was a discussion about the fact that the speakers had not been of very good quality. And ultimately, there were various discussions about other campaigns that could be supported. Then finally this. On Ulster, blank praised the recent actions of the IRA, which she described as a good way to start a revolution. And then you list who else was present. Did you note that down specifically using quotes in your report because you felt that it was important for Special Branch to know precisely the sort of concern that you understood you were being tasked to find out about?
Yes, that's probably right, yes.
Two more reports, please. This is UCPI 1, lots of zeros, 26996, please. This is 21st of April, 1971. A report where you are attending a meeting of the North London branch of the Women's Liberation Front. It's a study group again, taking place in someone's home, and there were 11 people present. Just towards the bottom of that, we can see on the screen, do we see that you were discussing that evening there was a general discussion regarding the Chinese revolutionary film called The East is Red? That film was going to be screened at the community hall, and indeed we'll see another report where it was. Do you recall that was a film supporting the Maoist approach and agenda?
I'm assuming that that's what that was. Yes.
The next report deals with the same film. This is UCPI 1, lots of zeros, 26997, please. This was a meeting, I think a couple of weeks later, on 4th of May, about a meeting of the Friends of China that was held at the home of Diane Langford. Did you know her to be the partner of Abhimanya Machanda?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. I don't remember. If I haven't included it in my report, then I wouldn't have known. I certainly don't remember.
Do you recall why you were attending a meeting of the Friends of China?
No, I must have been directed to go to it.
Was Diane Langford somebody involved in the Women's Liberation Front?
I can't remember.
The third paragraph demonstrates that blank opened the meeting by discussing the Women's Liberation Front magazine. So there is some overlap here, but that blank deny the great WLF and the publication, claiming that too much time and money has been used in that production. If we scroll down, please, to paragraph 5, thank you. There was then a discussion that took place on the film, The East is Red. Most members had seen the film at the Cameo Poly Theatre, Regent Street. During the discussion, blank, the film had portrayed too much violence. Blank, blank, however, felt that not enough violence had been displayed by the film. Were you aware of a contingent of the group that you were infiltrating who was keen on advocating violence?
If I've written anything to that effect in my reports, then, well, that must have been what I thought at the time.
UCPI 1, lots of zeros, 27026, please. Another report. This is a meeting on the 8th of December, 1971. It's a meeting of the Women's Liberation Front, and there were 18 people present. If you just scroll down again, further, please. The meeting was chaired by blank, who opened the meeting at 7:30 p.m. by introducing the speaker. Blank, who had recently returned from China, having visited there on several previous occasions, began. began with an outline of recent Chinese history up to the present day. And there was then a discussion further about how the groups were running themselves in China. Blank was clearly very impressed by the Chinese system. The group was then invited to ask questions, and the meeting developed into a discussion on the day-to-day lives of the Chinese in every aspect, and particularly on the new medical methods, especially acupuncture. Blank mentioned that he had visited many hospitals, schools, factories and communes in various cities and had taken photographs of these, which he then showed to the group on a projector. Next page, please. Blank asked Blank if our society needed to change and whether the Chinese methods would work here. Blank felt our society was in desperate need of a change and that the Chinese methods would work here. He then asked Blank how he would achieve the change, to which Blank replied, by violent revolution. Blank agreed. Is that another example of you using quotations to highlight to your superiors the views of some of the group that you were reporting on, of exactly the sorts of things that Special Branch were concerned to monitor and follow?
I've tried to, if I've included it in the report, yes.
UCPI, UCPI, lots of zeros, 10905. This is the annual general meeting of February 1972, and that you were reporting on the events that took place at that meeting of the Women's Liberation Front's first general meeting, annual general meeting. If we scroll down to see the agenda, please. Paragraph 3. The proposed agenda was as follows. The Acting Secretary reports, the Treasurer's report, adoption of new aims and constitution, and election of officers and committee, and future activities and any other business. Could we move to paragraph 9, please, on the next page? UCPI, lots of zeros, 10905/2. Blank suggested that the Women's Liberation Front should change its name, and it was proposed that the organisation be known as the Revolutionary Women's League. It was then decided that this could not be implemented until there was further discussion. And then matters of administration were dealt with. But did that indicate a shift at all in your experience of the group? A shift in the attitude or the aims of the group for them to want to rename, to include the word revolution in their title?
Yeah, that would appear so.
You append with this report the documents that were handed out at the meeting. And we see that if we scroll down to page 4, UCPI 10905/4.
Forgive me, my emergency telephone operated. It was nothing more than a request to you, HN348, please, to speak up a bit because people are having difficulty hearing you.
Oh, all right, sorry.
Not at all.
This 348 is the first page of a lengthy document that you supplied and checked from the AGM of the Women's Liberation Front meeting. Do you recall collecting and submitting that with your report?
I don't recall any of that, but if it's been submitted with my report and my name's next to it, I must have done it. Yes.
Thank you. Do we see there at the second paragraph, with some numbers slightly obscured, but that the aims of this new group with the direction heading towards revolution, if the name change is an invitation of their intentions, let's have a look at what their names are. To organise women in general, working class women in particular, to fight for the elimination of all exploitation and oppression, and for a socialist society. To expose the oppressions suffered by women and to relate this to capitalist society, and to oppose those who confuse the effects of women's oppression for the real cause, i.e. the private ownership of the means of production. To demand equal opportunities in employment and education. To fight for equal pay and for work of equal value. In order that women have real opportunities to take part in socialist production, we demand that creches and nurseries are installed at that place of work. At the place of work, education, and in the community, wherever there is a need. All women should have the right to have children or not, in order to make this right effective, alongside childcare facilities, adequate contraceptive and abortion information, and facilities should be made available free on the NHS. To demand maternity leave for a definite period with no loss of pay in the prenatal and postnatal periods, and the right to return to the same job guaranteed by law, to fight against all discrimination and injustice suffered by women and in all realms of society. In laws as regards to marriage and divorce, in the superstructure, customs and culture, to fight against the discrimination suffered by unmarried mothers and their children, to wage a consistent struggle against male chauvinism and to read and to strive to educate and encourage men to participate in all our activities, to take full part in the struggles against the growing attacks on our standard of living and our democratic rights, and against the growing racism and fascist policies of the ruling class, to mobilise women to support the anti-interferist struggles of all oppression, reading to the words oppression. Did that list of items there, the aims set out, 1 to 12 there, 348, represent the core aims of the group, whether it was called, as it became known, the Revolutionary Women's Union?
Well, that's what's written down in the Constitution, and that's what their aims were.
Finally, on this topic, UCPI lots of zeros, 8274. This is a little difficult to read, but it's better on the screen. This is a meeting in April 1972. It is the Women's Liberation Conference that was held at the Student Union building. And here you reference the links to and the people that were attending that had links to the Angry Brigade. And I think the Stoke Newington 8, were those the sorts of groups that you were particularly tasked? Yes, it's paragraph 31, which is at page 6 of this report. As an example, UCPI, lots of zeros, 8274/6. Do we see there at the top, several women asked the next conference should have a firm agenda and a more rigid format. These suggestions were subjected to the usual heckling by the many, it's difficult to read this part. And I think that the many GLF, who were the Gay Liberation Front members, I think, accounts, and the Angry Brigade members. And at paragraph 31, an unidentified female associated with the Angry Brigade gave out copies of conspiracy notes and made a short statement on the, it's difficult to determine what that, very difficult to determine. Oh gosh. On the necessity for groups to organise against growing oppression in society. She explained that where she could be contacted, and she said that the Stoke Newington 8 had been charged with very serious offences and asked for assistance from any group prepared to work with them. Were you aware whether assistance was given to this lady connected with the Angry Brigade of the Stoke Newington 8 by the Women's Liberation Front or the Revolutionary Women's Union, as it became known?
I can't remember, but not to my knowledge. If I haven't reported on it, it's because I can't remember any of this.
But these were the sorts of the links that you understood that you were expected to report back on of being particular interest to Special Branch.
That's correct.
One further group I'd like to ask you about in terms of the reporting. Please could we have up UCPI's, lots of zeros, 27028. This is a report dated the 23rd of November 1971. It's a report about the Women's Liberation Front. It's recording your attendance at a meeting on the 18th of November. It's a weekly meeting in somebody's home and there were 15 people present. If we can scroll down, please. Thank you. At paragraph 3, we can see that the meeting was opened by Blank, who chaired the meeting. She announced that the evening would be devoted to a talk from Leila Hassan of the Black Unity and Freedom Party, Women's Action Group on the oppression of Black women. Was this group a group that you had been asked to pay particular attention to by Special Branch at all?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Were you aware at the time of a significant trial that was ongoing of a number of people called the Mangrove 9, who were being tried for inciting riot?
No. I have not got no recollection of that.
Were you aware of the Mangrove 9, who were a number of people being prosecuted? They had been arrested following an incident at a restaurant known as the Mangrove, which was frequented by the Black community and had been often raided by the police.
No, I'd never heard of that group until now, until you've mentioned it.
So it follows that you wouldn't have known of this lady, Leila Hassan's connection with that group?
No.
The Mangrove 9?
No.
Can we take this report down, please? Can we now examine quite how it was that you carried out your role in terms of your reporting and chart your entry into the group and try and summarise its development during your infiltration? If we have up on the screen the report, UCPI Lots of zeros. 26988, please. Yes. This is a report dated 17th of February, 1971. And it is the first report that we've been able to find with your name typed on it. (348). You'll recall we saw a little earlier that report from HN348 that had returned to the fact that a new branch of the Women's Liberation Front was going to be opening in North London and one in South London. That was on the 22nd of January. And here, on the 17th of February, so 3 weeks later, you're attending a meeting of the Women's Liberation Front in a pub. Does that help you with the timing of your start date of the deployment? And why were you targeting this particular group? And why you were targeting this particular group?
No, not really. I can't remember this at all.
This was a meeting in the Duke of Clarence Public House in South East London. It was a public meeting. If we just scroll down a little, please. There were 20 people present, and the speakers were Myra Shields, Roberta Farr, Jack somebody, Mary S, and the chair was Diane Langford. Some individuals identified there. Abimanya Manchada. Does this look like the sort of meeting you recalled as being the beginning of your deployment? Or were you referring to something different?
I don't recall this meeting in a public house at all. The public meetings that I went to were larger, in bigger public buildings.
Just scroll down, because we do see your cipher and therefore your typed name at the bottom.
Yeah, if that's the case, then it must be right. But I've got no recollection at all.
I think it's on the next page that we would see your, there we are, UCPI, lots of zeros, 26988/2. Then let's move to the next report on the 25th of February, so a week later. This is UCPI, lots of zeros, 26989. And here it is again, at the meeting of the Women's Liberation Front. But the source of the information stems from a personal invitation from a former Women's Liberation meeting. Again, your name appears at the bottom. Would it make sense if you'd been invited during the course of the meeting in the Duke of Clarence Public House to attend this meeting?
Yeah, that would follow. But I'm sorry, but I can't remember any of this at all.
This was a private flat occupied. This was in a private flat occupied by blank. And the subject is Women's Liberation Study Group. If we just scroll down, please. To the top of the page, to the top of page 2, UCPI zeros 26989/2. Thank you. The study group commenced with blank, reading from a booklet relating to a conversation between Lenin and Clara Zetkin. And on the face of it appears to be discussions as titles, a study group, and your name appears at the bottom. Do you recall how many meetings of a public nature you went to before being invited into people's private homes?
No, I can't recall numbers.
We can see one example. Do you think there were many more?
I think I went to more than one, yes.
What we then see in the reporting is a pattern of weekly meetings in people's homes. Can we have a look at the next report? UCPI 026990, please. The last report had been of a meeting on the 5th of February. And this is the meeting of the 4th of March. So on the face of it, a week later. And again, it was in a private location. And again, it was by personal invitation. Again, a study group. Does this help you with remembering the pattern? Remembering the pattern of meetings that you were attending during your deployment?
No, it doesn't. I don't recognise the format of this report at all.
If we scroll down to the bottom of the page, sorry, the next page, forgive me, page 2, UCPI 026990/2, your name and rank appear right at the bottom and your signature is there.
Well, if that's the case, then, well, that would have been my report, but I don't recognise the way that that's been formatted.
Well, then let's look at the next one in sequence, and perhaps that will be enough for this point, because you may be more familiar with the format. The next one in sequence is a week later. It's UCPI, lots of zeros, 26992. It's the 15th of March. The last meeting had been the 4th. And this is the 11th. And it's a meeting between 7:30 and 9:30 in the evening. Do you recall that the meetings in people's homes tended to be in the evenings, 348?
Yes.
And it was the Women's Liberation Front study group at blank, the home of blank. There were 7 people present. You again are reading out from extracts of the booklet entitled Lenin Conversations with Clara Zetkin, and studying, as in the earlier meeting, reports, a study group. Does that help? Does that format seem a little bit more familiar if we scroll down to the page to see your signature or your name typed at the bottom? Does that help? Does that format look a little bit more familiar to you?
Yes, that looks more familiar. But if my signature is on it, then I must have written it.
Thank you.
But I can't recall it, sorry.
Recalling now your deployment overall. If the meetings reveal a pattern, of week frequency, that you were attending these meetings every week and that they were at 2 home addresses. The first one, there was the initial host whose home you attended every week by and large between February 1971 and February 1972. Does that accord with your recollection of your deployment?
As far as I can recall, yes.
There came a time, however, in February 1972, where there was quite some disagreement internally within the group, and ultimately the direction of the group and which direction that should be taken and which direction it should be taken was not agreed, and there was a change of leadership, and that led in turn to a change of host for these weekly meetings, and they began to take place at somebody else's home on a fairly frequent basis from February 1972. Does that accord with your recollections of your deployment?
I can't remember, I'm sorry.
If we look at what happened in February 1972, we can see that at the AGM, that on the face of it, you began being able to report on different information because you secured access to the executive committee by becoming treasurer of the group. Can you remember that?
I don't remember it at all, no.
Let's have a look to see the reports that you were able to submit.
Yeah.
UCPI 10908, please. This is the Women's Liberation Front, and in the left-hand side, there's also the reference to known as the Revolutionary Women's Union, and it's a meeting that takes place on the 17th of February 1972. If we scroll to item 3, please, or paragraph 3, we can see that the meeting was chaired and the following agenda was proposed. Discussion of the previous meeting, a discussion of the anti-apartheid demonstration held on Sunday the 6th of February. There was the film showing the detachment of women. There was then a reference to a jumble sale required for fundraising, and then the discussion of future activities and the change of the name of the organisation. If we look to the minutes of that meeting, they were appended, or the minutes of the AGM that were appended at page 4 of this document. UCPI 10908/4. And if we zoom in, do we see that there is a reference to the fact that the number of officers had been elected at the recent AGM? Blank and blank were elected as secretary and president. And then Sandra Davis was elected as treasurer. Given that there was no other Sandra in the group, is it possible that this was you?
It's possibly could have been me, but I have no recollection of taking up the post as treasurer.
Would you agree that those posts appeared to be a post that could compromise the executive committee of the Women's Liberation Front, who changed their name?
Yeah, that would be it.
And so, from the month of February on, if you had been elected to treasurer, it would have enabled you to report on the executive committee, as we in fact see that you did. Can we see UCPI 10906, please? (16th of February 1972). On Wednesday, the 9th of February 1972, the Executive Committee of the Women's Liberation Front hold a meeting at the home of blank. The following persons were present. If we pan out, we can see that your cipher and therefore typed name appears at the bottom. Does that help with your recollection?
If I've signed that, then I must have submitted it, but I've got no recollection.
You wouldn't then recall that, as we see the reporting from the Executive Committee, it's a very small number of people that attend these meetings, rarely more than 5, and you're amongst them, meeting in people's homes. Does that accord with your recollection of your deployment that spanned over 2 years? Nearly 2 years.
Are you questioning the number of people that were? I think beforehand, one wouldn't know how many people would have attended these meetings, whether they're small or large.
Well, helpfully, you record every time how many people are there and a list of names of the people that attend. And for the weekly meetings in people's homes, it's right to say that there were rarely more than 15, often more like 10 or 11 people attending in these 2 homes that you frequented every week. Does that help with your recollection?
If I've written it and signed it, then it must have been what's happened. But no, I don't recall it.
Then when you secured greater access to the Executive Committee, in that there was a smaller number of people, then there were about 5 or so that would routinely meet as part of the executive group. Do you recall that?
No,
Do you remember that?
not really. Not really.
Can you just help us picture these meetings in people's homes? They began at sort of 7:30 in the evening. Oh gosh, that lasted until about 10:30 at night. Is that right?
If that's what I've written, yeah.
Were they in the home? Which room?
They were in a lounge, I think, with just comfortable seating and a table.
Would the hosts offer you food and drink?
Not that I recall, no.
Would you have eaten before you went?
Probably, yes.
Did people all arrive at the same time, or did people arrive bit by bit?
I can't remember.
Were there discussions before the formal meeting began?
I can't remember.
Did people naturally discuss or reveal information about how their day had been or what had been going on in their lives when they would meet you every week?
No, not that I recall.
Did you ever reveal any information about yourself during these many hour meetings every week?
No, I didn't.
How did you avoid that?
I've never asked. These people were very vocal. They did a lot of talking, and you know what? They were quite happy to have somebody to listen to them.
You told us that you informed your senior managers about the fact that you were attending meetings in people's homes. Did those senior managers ever indicate to you that they had given any consideration of whether you should be doing this?
No. I was told to continue on with what I was doing.
Did you ever get the impression that there was any balance operating in the minds of senior managers about how involved you should be in attending these close-knit meetings in people's homes?
I discussed with them the meetings, the numbers, what went on, I submitted a written report. And the feedback that I had from my senior officers was that I should continue doing what I was doing.
Did you ever feel uncomfortable seeing these women week in, week out, when they didn't know that you were a policewoman and were reporting their discussions back to Special Branch?
Did I feel uncomfortable about that? I was doing a job at the time. So I wasn't, I don't think I considered that. No, I was just doing my job.
Some of the things that you reported back to Special Branch were of a different nature, from links to the IRA, and included information about what the group was going to do in relation to, for example, baking. Can we see UCPI zeros 10932 on the screen, please? If we look, this was a meeting in December, mid-December 1971. If we go to the top of the second page, please, at paragraph 5, UCPI zeros 10932/2. Can we see at paragraph 5 there that blank stated that the BUFP intended to hold a children's Christmas party on Saturday, the 18th of December, 1971 at Stoke Newington, and the Women's Liberation Front members were being asked for contributions in the form of homemade sweets and cakes. Why did you think that Special Branch needed to know that?
I don't think the information itself, it's just the fact that they were involving themselves with children and the sweets and the cakes were an addition to that. What they wanted to do was to get their philosophy across to as many groups as they could. That was their aim.
The next report, UCPI zeros 10907. If we scroll down, please. To paragraph 5, you've included there in your report that the provisional date for the fundraising jumble sale was set as the 25th of the 3rd, 72. But they haven't. But the have not new was not arranged. Why did Special Branch need to know the date of the jumbo sale?
Well, it would have been a group activity, I imagine. There's no details of where it was being held, but I think they would have used it as another opportunity to advertise their aims.
And finally, on this topic, UCPI zeros 10931, please. Now, this is a little more difficult to read. This is January 1970. This is a January 1972 report. It's the paragraph that begins that we can see on the screen there. The meeting was opened by blank. Difficult to read there, but it says she read a copy of a letter referencing the fact that a letter had been sent to somebody of Banner Books. blank of Banner Books regarding the something to do with the Women's Liberation Front. But then this, the letter criticised blank for, it's difficult to read there, but it appears to be for saying that blank of having an affair with blank allegation had prompted blank to, I think, end her employment at Banner Books. Do you recall this incident and why you needed to report back about the allegation of an affair amongst the group?
As I say, I don't recall it, but it's a document signed by me, so therefore I must have written it, and probably this was just showing an example of how this group was functioning.
And how would information about whether somebody had an affair within the group help the effective policing of this group and its movement?
I think it's just gives people an insight into what was happening at the time.
Was this ever an example of you reporting to one of your superiors and being told, well, that information's irrelevant and we don't need to know the information, that information in future? Was this an example?
Well, I would have written the report, discussed it with my senior officer, and if at the time he thought that that was irrelevant, then he would have probably told me to exclude it, and he would have said to me, well, we don't need to know that.
Given it still remains in the report, then obviously that view was not formed.
That's right.
As appears to have been the case, for you to have been reporting on the executive committee, you must have, on the face of it, been elected as treasurer, as the AGM in February 1972 records. Do you agree? Is it fair to say that you must have been trusted by the group?
Yes, I must. I was trusted by the group.
In that role, did you make some decisions about the direction of the group?
I didn't make any decisions about the direction of the group.
Can we have UCPI 010906 up, please? This is a report of 16th of February 1972. It's the Executive Committee meeting on the 9th of February 1972. I keep checking it's not my internet that's frozen and that it is theirs.
Oh, here we go.
The following persons were present. Now, if it were necessary, we can confirm that there were 5 names there under that redaction, that privacy redaction, revealing who is named to be present at that meeting. If we scroll down, can we see, I'll just get my copy up, can we see item 7, forgive me, item 7 on the agenda? Thank you. Blank proposed that the name of the organisation to be changed to the Revolutionary Women's Union. After some discussion, this too was agreed. This discussion could only have been amongst the Executive Committee 348. Is that right?
I assume so.
And so you were one of a group, including yourself, of 6 who made the decision to change the name of the group to include the word revolution. Do you recall that?
No, I don't recall making any decisions about how the group would be run.
UCPI 010911, please. Again, this is a meeting, now a month later in March 1972. It's the Executive Committee again. The name has changed and it's the Revolutionary Women's Union now. There's an emergency meeting at the home of blank, and those present included, and those names are blacked out for privacy reasons. Can I just help you with your recollection? Again, do you recall that there were only 5 names recorded as present at that Executive Committee meeting? 6 of you, including you.
If that's what's written, then that's correct, but I don't recall it.
And if we scroll to paragraph 4, did the meeting discuss the various incidents at length that had happened recently, some disruptive behaviour that had been going on? And was it decided eventually that the three offending members should be served with an official written suspension from the organisation? This document would take some 3 weeks to compile and would outline many of their disruptive tactics, and a copy would be circulated to all members. And then the meeting concluded is at 1:30 p.m, at 11:30 p.m, with your name typed at the bottom. Do you recall you were a member of a group of 6 who decided to suspend the members of the Revolutionary Women's Union?
No, I don't recall any of this, but I accept that my name is at the bottom of that report.
Do you recall that this internal division led to a reduced enthusiasm and drive within the group?
I can't comment on that. I've got no idea.
UCPI 010913, please. Do we see in that report dated the 8th of May, 1972, that the meeting having been held at the home of somebody, there was opened with a statement of the current position of the Revolutionary Women's Union. She felt that like the organisation was not functioning as it should and that there was a general lack of enthusiasm towards activities. She commented on the lack of new membership and the falling off of old members. Does that fit with the internal division and the suspension of members which you'd had a hand in?
That seems to be the case, yes.
Ultimately, 348, were you withdrawn from the field in February 1973?
That's correct.
To the extent that you reported on activities of other groups, was that as those other groups and activities occurred on the periphery of the main group, the Women's Liberation Front, that later became known as the Revolutionary Women's Union?
I'm sorry, could you, I don't understand the question.
You reported on other groups. We saw an example earlier of I think there was the Friends of China group that had a report title. Those groups or meetings you attended, were they specifically because they were operating on the periphery of your main target group, hence you were tasked to attend?
You're referring to my withdrawal from my work?
I'm trying to sort of deal with your deployment as a whole. Your main target group was the Women's Liberation Front, which later changed its name. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And to the extent that you reported on other groups, was that because they were spin-offs, or there'd been a reason prompted by your infiltration of the main group?
Yes.
You attended a number of conferences. Again, was that because you were a trusted member of the Women's Liberation Front?
I think those larger meetings were public meetings, weren't they?
And you gathered the materials and reports that were handed out at those meetings and passed them back to Special Branch?
Yes, that's correct.
You were withdrawn because of some matter connected with another undercover officer, is that right?
That's right, yes.
And I think you say at paragraph 34 of your statement, if we just bring that up, it's page 15, paragraph 34.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I need to put the light on.
Oh, has it got dark? Yes, of course, we're nearly there. MPS 041698/15.
That's better.
Can you see now 348? Paragraph 34, we see on the screen there. You said halfway through that paragraph, it was not until the SDS got involved that we knew if it was worthwhile to infiltrate a group. I do not think my work really yielded any good intelligence, but I eliminated the WLF from public order concerns. When do you think you had done that?
It's difficult to judge, really. Probably up until the time that I finished working there. You know, until the time I was withdrawn. I can't pin it down. I find it very difficult, the sequencing of these events. As it's nearly 50 years ago.
I fully understand that you're being asked to recount events a long time ago. I'm asking about the phrase that you chose to use in your statement, that you're in your statement there, thinking that you hadn't really yielded any good intelligence. Given you were withdrawn from your deployment for a reason connected with a different officer, do you understand whether you would have continued to be deployed in the Women's Liberation Front if it weren't for that incident?
As I understood it, I probably would have been, yes. There was no indication that I was going to be withdrawn otherwise.
Did you raise the view that certainly by February 1973, you concluded that the Women's Liberation Front didn't pose any public order concerns?
Well, I was submitting my reports.
Maybe the internet is having some amnesia now.
Oh
gosh, there we go.
I was submitting my reports to my senior officer and was guided by him mainly.
Page 44 of the same document, please, paragraph 116. The last line of that paragraph. In hindsight, I would not have joined the SDS as I was putting myself too much at risk and there were more worthwhile things I could have been doing. Does that indicate that, in your view, your infiltration of the Women's Liberation Front, which later changed its name, was not worthwhile?
I think, you know, I wrote this statement over a year ago and 50 years on from whence. So that statement is made with a much older head, and therefore hindsight is a wonderful thing. And I stand by what I say. I could have been doing much more worthwhile things with my time than doing my work with the SDS.
Did you also offer in your statement an opinion as to undercover policing by policemen at all? Page 49 of your statement, paragraph 133. It's right to the top of actually the bottom of page 48 of the same document, please. Right at the bottom. I question whether police officers should be undercover at all. Going on to the next page, MPS 041698/69, it seems that perhaps undercover work should all be dealt with by the security service, simply with links to senior police officers.
Yeah, that's my view now.
Having done the job for 2 years, that's your view now?
Yeah, and 50 years on, yeah.
348, if you wait there, please. There will follow, I think, a pause for about 10 minutes or so. Then I think the chairman will come back and we'll see if there's any further questions to be asked of you.
Would you bear with us for another 10 minutes while those who may have questions they wish to ask reflect on whether or not they need to do so? Your giving of evidence will be over very soon. That I promise. Would you bear with us for that 10 minutes?
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take a short pause for 10 minutes. Short break.
Oh, I don't think you're getting very good lines, Maxine. I'm sorry. You haven't got a very good memory.
Well, it is 50 years, but I'm fascinated about it. I'll never look at a jumble sale in the same way ever again.
Yeah.
There were more worthwhile things you could have been doing.
It's immersive baking.
Oh.
I loved the bit where, Lisa, you read the manifesto of the Women's Liberation Movement?
Yes,
we need to relaunch that, don't we?
Yes. Definitely. And you just go, God, 50 years ago, and how much hasn't,
absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to go here. Yeah.
Yeah, and he didn't ask whether she agreed with any of it or had agreed with any of it at the time.
No, I think, what's it, Women's Revolution? Yeah, should we, after this call, should we kick it off?
Yeah. Yeah, I think some people have already talked about it, haven't they? Launching a new Women's Lib movement.
Wow.
I think just the waste of money, man. That's the main thing. What, at this point anyway?
Yeah. Just shocking. I mean, it's some of it I had to stop myself from laughing because it's ludicrous. It's not funny. It's ludicrous. You know what I mean? Of just how ludicrous it is. Yeah.
And I also I'm so glad I'm only doing this for a couple of hours. But if this is how they're expecting us to keep up with the evidence. This kind of, I don't know if your eyes are going. I'm going very cross-eyed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite hard. I did have to switch the light on at one point.
Yeah.
Can I get to a light switch quickly?
Yeah. And it's shocking that she was in there for 2 years, constantly reporting that there was nothing much to report. Some
cakes being baked in a jumble sale. Oh dear.
Even though we know it, those of us who followed it quite closely, we know a lot of, we know how small scale some of this was, but when you hear it like this again, it's just, anyway, 10-minute break, 5-minute break.
Yeah, I might just have to go and close my eyes and plug my laptop in.
Yeah, now's when we should be streaming some kind of music, shouldn't we?
You could put the PSOL video up.
That would involve far too much technical risk of showing things on the screen that shouldn't be shown. So I'm going to mute for 2 minutes and then we'll come back.
Yeah,
All right.
good idea.
See you in a minute. Oh, would you?
Right. Oh,
Is that the last break or this break?
that's before. That's just.
Is it? Oh, you see. I mean, I'm going absolutely cross-eyed.
Oh,
but it did come. Here we go, Miss Petter. Welcome back, everyone. I will now hand over to the chairman to continue proceedings. Thank you, Ms. Brander. Is there any question that you want to ask arising out of that evidence?
Am I Miss Brander? I guess
you are. Yeah.
So there are 3 topics. If I could very briefly ask questions on those. The first is the SDS meetings and what was discussed. The second is whether this witness was aware of any activity falling below the level of sexual relationships, but of the nature that we've heard. So, for example, going out for a drink with a member of the opposite sex from a group. And the third issue is just really one question, or possibly 2, in relation to the school's action union.
You may ask questions about all 3 topics.
I'm grateful. Thank you, sir. HN348. I'm sorry, I can't see you yet on the screen. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Thank you. I'm hoping that you'll pop up next time when I ask the question. You were asked by Miss Wilkinson about the SDS, meetings, the regular meetings you had at the cover flat. And I think you said that they took up a good part of the day, but that you didn't discuss the detail of deployment, just if there was anything really unusual. And sometimes there would be a briefing like the one you'd received from HN45. I just wondered, given that they took up a good part of the day, what was it that was discussed at those meetings?
Well, each individual officer would spend time writing their feedback reports and then have a one-to-one session with the senior officer, and that would be in another area away from the main group. So we would just wait. We'd just be waiting for our turn, really, to go and talk to a senior officer. So that usually took quite a bit of time.
Were you all together when you were waiting?
Yes.
So would you be chatting to one another?
Yes, yes.
I mean, what was the atmosphere like? Was it friendly?
Yes, it was.
And I mean, would there be sort of office banter between you, that sort of thing?
Yeah, to a degree, yeah.
And what about the atmosphere? I mean, we heard from you that it was quite unusual for you to be a female officer in the force in general. But in that unit, I think there was just 2 of you.
That's right.
How did that feel?
Well, because there were 2 of us, we got on very well and we supported each other. I think within that group.
And what about your relationships with the men? I mean, did you feel an air of sexism within the group?
No, I didn't experience that at all. Yeah, they were quite an amiable group, actually, that I was with.
And what about banter? Was there ever any banter within the group?
I think there was, all police officers together, but it was not offensive.
And did your fellow officers ever mention individuals in the groups that they were deployed into?
No, we generally didn't discuss our individual groups amongst the larger groups.
And you said that sometimes someone would say something, someone would say something if there was something really unusual. Did that ever involve comments on individuals?
Not that I can recall specifically. We tended to not talk to each other about the groups that we were involved with. the discussions about our group was only with the senior officer.
And so what was that conversation about? What sort of thing would you be discussing?
Well, I would write my report and submit it, and then I would usually discuss the latest meeting that I'd been to with my senior officer.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean the discussion with the senior officer. I meant in the group. You were saying that you were hanging around for basically quite a long time, waiting to see
Oh, right.
the senior officer. You weren't talking about your deployment. What were you talking about?
I can't remember, but I suppose we just talked about things that, you know, people do, holidays and houses and families.
Okay. And you said that you weren't aware of any relationships within your group, in the sense that as far as you were aware, no one within your cohort had a sexual relationship with a member of a group that they were deployed into. Is that right?
No, I feel pretty sure that they didn't. No, not at all.
And were you aware of any of your cohort going out for a drink with a member of a group that they were deployed into?
I wasn't aware of that, no.
Or taking a member of a group out to dinner?
No, not at all. I think their involvement was much more distant. I mean, I don't know where we're having the meetings. I mean, if they met in a pub as a group, then probably they would have shared a drink together. But I'm just guessing. I'm surmising that.
And sorry, in terms of building credibility within the group that you were infiltrating, was there ever a discussion with your colleagues about ways to do that?
No.
So there wasn't any discussion of making friendships or perhaps taking people out for a drink that was a good way of building credibility within the group?
No, not at all.
I want to ask you, is it possible to have up on the screen UCPI zeros 10928, please? Okay, so this is the report dated the 12th of May, 1972. And if it's possible to go down the second page, down to the second page, the bottom of the second page, UCPI 10928, and it's redacted, but do you see there that it has HN348?
Yeah.
WDC. So does this appear to be a report that has your name on it?
That's correct, yes.
And sorry, just going... I'm sorry, just going to the first page, thank you. It appears to be a report about a school strike on Monday, the 8th of May, 1972, by the Schools Action Union. Do you recall reporting on that group?
No, I don't.
Just looking down, it says they had organised a school strike, which affected several North London schools. They were demanding teacher-pupil committees to run the schools, no school uniforms, no corporal punishment, free school meals and milk, freedom to leave the school during a lunchtime break. And then it says approximately 800 children left their various schools during the mid-morning break and participated in a protest march, which was led by Blank, a member of the Schools Action Union and the London Alliance. Does that ring any bells?
Well, I've obviously reported on what I was told at a meeting.
So you think this was a report of something that you'd been told at a meeting?
Yeah, because I wasn't involved in any of that.
So you weren't involved in that group, but you were reporting on it. And just looking at the left-hand side where it says reference to papers, and it's not very clearly printed. I don't know if that would be a 4 there, perhaps 400. Does that code there under reference to papers, does that indicate it's a special branch file?
I don't know. I don't know what it refers to.
I know you were asked previously by Miss Wilkinson about consideration of the groups that you were reporting on, but was any consideration given to the appropriateness of reporting on school children?
Do you mean by the question, the reporting on school children? I was reporting on the action of groups. That was what was said to me. I wasn't reporting on children.
Well, the report here is about action taken by children, isn't it?
Yeah. I think. I'm just surmising that this information is about a report that came out from a meeting that I attended, but I don't know anything about the Schools Association, Schools Action Union. I wasn't involved in any of that.
It's quite a lengthy report, isn't it?
Yeah.
It gives quite a lot of detail about the action that the children were taking. If we scroll down to the second page, UCPI 010928/2. It refers to 2 arrests there, one of an 18-year-old and one of a 16-year-old. The fact that they'd been granted bail, and then we've got at paragraph 8, during Monday evening, and then there's a redaction, the 4 other young boys and girls who had participated in the march, stuck up a number of posters advertising a further strike for the next day.
I think what this report is I think, it's me quoting what was said at a meeting.
I see. So do you think all of this detail was given to you at a meeting? But my question is, this is information that was reported back to your senior officers. Did your senior officers express any concern to you about whether it was appropriate to be reporting and recording information about school children?
Well, if I've submitted this report, it would have been to my senior officer. I would have had a meeting with him. And if he didn't want to submit it, he would have told me at the time.
And can you remember him telling you anything about it?
No, I don't. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been submitted.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Those are all the questions.
Mr. Menon, was there any topic on which you want to ask questions?
Mr. Menon has just indicated to me that he doesn't have any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Saunders, do you have any, what in old-fashioned terms is called re-examination?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you. HN348, thank you for bearing with us. Your evidence is about all events 49 or 50 years ago has been very interesting. I'm very grateful to you for coming here and telling us all about it. Your time now is finished with the inquiry. And thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Purser. Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes today's hearings. We will resume at 11 a.m. tomorrow. You may leave the Zoom call or move into your breakout rooms. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much.
It was an absolute pleasure. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I feel very honoured to have been part of it. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Maxine. I'm going to. Well, I mean, we've had lots and lots of messages coming through saying how absolutely brilliant you've been. So I want to share those with you.
I just want to thank you for the amazing work that you're doing. You know, it's extraordinary and so vital. So thank you.
So tomorrow we will be back and we will be live streaming again from 11:30, because I think there's HN333 will have his statement of evidence read by somebody from the inquiry, and then we'll be doing this again from 11:30. So I'm going to now.
Can I thank in advance? Can I thank in advance everyone who's doing it tomorrow, because it means that I can spend some time listening rather than reading, because it's such a lot of physical effort, isn't it, to concentrate on the words.
But you do it very well, the pair of you. I'm very impressed. I'm a little bit worried about the job.
Thank you.
So we're going to end the live stream, but can we stay on the call just for 2 minutes?
Brilliant.
Yeah.